Hi everyone, we finally made it. So Mel and I were originally going to have this conversation last Friday, but time differences in the same damn country. And Mel's been busy traveling. But anyway, we're here now. We made it. My good friend Mel. Honestly, I've known Mel for a long time. We met in New Zealand, and now we are also both in the US. So what a funny coincidence. So Mel is a registered clinical naturopath, nutritionist, and health coach, and her approach focuses on addressing the upstream, like the root causes of why people have their symptoms, rather than managing them. She places a strong emphasis in supporting clients who reinforce the key foundations of long term well being, which is movement, nutrition, mindset, mindfulness, rest and sleep, and positive human connection. So, Mel's approach is very grounded. It's based in behavioral change science, and she supports clients to better understand their holistic health needs, build agency, and make sustainable changes that are realistic, personalized, and life integrated. So, she is clearly amazing. But we're not actually going to talk too much about that today because Mel's also been a yoga student and teacher for like decades. So that's actually how I first met Mel, was going to one of her yoga classes. And the minute I met her, I knew that she is not just someone who's just like going to tell you how to do these poses. She's going to like weave some wisdom into you as she takes you through these asanas. So I want to talk about the bridge between the yamas and niyamas, which is a yogic philosophical like framework. Is that right? I'll let you correct me. And I want to really focus on that and the intersection between actually both our work, right? Because in your clinical work, you also see people struggling in their relationship with food and how they relate with themselves. And I just want to make a little bridge here and see if it lands with you or not. But I have a feeling that it will, because the yoga principles, the first one is ahimsa. And you've probably seen this word, in many places. Second one, satya. Those are the only two that come to mind, but there's like 8 of them. Is that right? Yeah. And
And
so,
10, sorry. Yeah. Five
yeah,
niyamas and five yamas.
yeah. So I think this is where our conversation is going to actually go today. We're going to start by talking about these yogic philosophies and how they weave into our relationship with food, because it's very much not about fixing, but it's very much about understanding. And then how do you kind of proceed from there, as opposed to seeing emotional eating or overeating or binge eating as a problem, right? In the same way that you don't see your clients as like, oh, they've got these problems. It's like, how do we actually look at it from a different lens? So, Mel, maybe do you want to just introduce yourself a little? Maybe tell us a bit more about your background, because I read, a bio, which is great, but also I would love to hear it from you. And then let's dive into the first one, ahimsa.
Okay. Thank you, Lulu. That
Yeah.
was a lovely intro. And I love the work you do, and we've known each other for a long time. It's true. And I think whether Lulu and I have yeah, practiced yoga together or just hung out for a coffee, it is a matter of, I think, minutes before we are in a deep philosophical conversation. And so I think that you summarized my bio great, and I don't need to go into great depths beyond it. I think that I've always been interested in philosophy, and so I think it's really beautiful to talk about yoga as a lens. And I think that for me, in all of the work that I've done in just my interests, I know that philosophy and meaning making and
Mm.
understanding is always been something I've been very curious about. So I've in my spare time studied Eastern philosophies and Western philosophies, and I think that there are some core themes that intersect that I think really lend itself to human flourishing and development. So it very much relates to well-being, holistic well-being. I think the way that we live and the way that we participate with life.
Mm.
So I'm happy to talk about it. But I will say, as you mentioned, I am as much of a student as I am a facilitator. So by no means am I an expert, but I think I'd love to have a discussion about where I think this into the yamas and niyamas has where it has impacted my life personally, but also
Mm.
how I see it impacting the lives of people I work with. Yeah, so I'm happy to get started on that.
I love that. Yeah, like with when ahimsa came up for me, and you mentioned like it kind of loosely translates to nonviolence, right? And I think of the word peace. And as it comes to how we relate with our bodies and with food, it has been my experience, my personal experience, and then also in my professional experience, that the core of it all is that people are at war with their bodies. and they're trying to control it, right, through food. So, because, food gives you this false sense that, like, if I just, well, I guess it's the product of the conditioning that we've been fed for decades and decades, and even older generations, that, it's the diet that changes things. And yes, it does. But that's not actually the thing, like the thing is you, right? But people like to kind of externalize their power. They like to think that it's a solution out there. This diet will help change me, right? And it's all coming, and this is the key, it's all coming from a place of I'm not good enough as I am. I need to, like, fight my body, because without these restraints, without me controlling what I eat, without me working hard at the gym to work off those calories, my body is going to put on fat, and that's going to make me undesirable. Like, it all comes back to that. And, like, I just sense this is a war, like. And so when I read about the yamas and niyamas, and I see how the first one is like peace, nonviolence, it's like, damn, like, this is straight in our faces. Like, this is at the core of many of our own wounding, and when we project our hurt outwards and harm other people, right? It's like there is this lack of inner okayness. Like, I don't accept myself as I am. I'm going to fight my body, fight my cravings, fight my desires. And so that's, I guess, a starting point. I feel like just this lack of peace within self, and therefore wanting to always control, wanting to manipulate. Because let's not, like, beat around the bush. The way I see it, when people go on a diet for, say, a week or two, a month, 2 months, to me, that's not change. That's manipulation. If you're doing it from a place of, I'm trying to change my body so that it can look a certain way, that's not change. That is manipulation. And manipulation don't last, right? You can hold a ball underwater, right? Provided the ball, is inflated with air. It's going to bounce back as soon as you lift the pressure. You're manipulating a behavior. You're not changing it, right? And so, yeah, that's my kind of big gobble about kind of why I want to talk to you about the yoga principles, because it's like the first one, like, hits home. So, yeah, I just pass it over to you to expand on your experience with Ahimsa, and, any other ones you want to bring in. So just, yeah.
Yeah. I think that you're right. Especially the word control resonates a lot. I think maybe to take a step back. So the yamas and niyamas, it provides a sort of like philosophical or ethical code of living, like a loose framework that allows people to consider how they're engaging with the world. And the idea is that if we can sort of follow this code, or use this code as a way to frame or relate to life, that it will enhance not only our own kind of, I guess you could say, holistic well-being, but also that of the communities around us, because we're interconnected. And so Ahimsa is sort of like the first one. And what's really amazing, that when you start studying these for a long time, you'll see that there is an interconnected relationship between all of them. And when you work with Ahimsa first, the other ones sort of make more sense, I guess you could say. And then vice versa. So Ahimsa, nonviolence. I think the term nonviolence is really interesting in itself, because you use the word peace. Some people say compassion, but I think that when I had a discussion with one of my teachers, nonviolence is used with intention, and it's this idea also to take a step back, that acknowledges that there will be potentially some struggle in life. There will be pain, maybe, right? There's a quote in a book that I've shared with you as well. And it connects with peace. The quote is, "Storms rage about me. I can calm my heart and send out ribbons of peace." So the connection with the peace, but also acknowledging that isn't going to come without friction sometimes. And I think when we look at control, and what I'm noticing a lot with clients is there has to be this sense of like courage and willingness to hold discomfort in a way, and not necessarily try, like you use the word of like pushing a ball underwater or manipulation. Nonviolence is asking us to like essentially like put down the ropes for a moment, not allow what could be perhaps not a pleasant situation or a comfortable situation, not allowing that to escalate into something bigger than it needs to be. And when we allow ourselves to drop the rope and make an intentional choice only then can we cultivate space and then clarity and then intentional response. And so
Mm.
nonviolence feels, like almost like I have to do something to bring peace to a situation. But sometimes it means actually doing nothing, like or
Mm.
actually just like allowing yourself to sit with what is coming up for you and not, you know,
Yeah.
um, and so I find that really interesting. And I remember being really captivated by that. It also is how, so in a way, it's like nonviolence is also like the willingness to feel safe, even when something is not how we want it to necessarily be in the moment.
So the first thing is when you mentioned that it's about dropping the rope and not escalating, the situation that came to mind is when it comes to food, a lot of us, myself included, I'm not, excluding myself, we have that kind of black and white thinking when,
Mm.
so this happens when we're in a place of trying to control, right? So we want things to go exactly how it goes. And actually, you said two things, safe when it's having yourself feel safe when it's not necessarily the outcome you wanted, right? But still being okay to sit with that. And then the not escalating is a huge one because what tends to happen is when you are in a pattern of control and restriction, then versus a total swing to the opposite, right? Like you control, control, control. Your food is perfect. Your exercise is perfect. You haven't missed a day for a week and you feel good about yourself. But then something inevitably happens, right? Life is going to test you. And then all of your emotions just kind of get out of whack and you can't hold the discomfort. And then you kind of pendulum swing to the other side and you go, well, screw this. I've already eaten one cookie. I'm just going to eat the entire sleep. And that's escalation. When I think about that, right? It's like in those moments, because we have that kind of black and white thinking of like, I have to have full control or nothing. Then what do you do with, life? Because life is the middle, right? And so like that's amazing that that first principle is actually applicable to this very moment, which is so relatable to so many people, right? Like, and this doesn't only happen with food. Sometimes we do this with other things as well, like maybe we make a mistake and then we just will give up then. Just this is not worth trying, right? And I would say those are probably all examples of escalation, right? Of when you feel like, well, I already messed up, so I'm just gonna screw everything and just, light this thing on fire instead of being like, okay, I screwed up. That's okay. I guess I'm human. Let's, think about calmly, like you said, right? It's like it's about dropping the rope and then being like, okay, well, how do I consciously move forward from this place? So those are the examples that came up for me when you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. And I guess if we're looking at the context of um, how we're treating our body, whether it's through nutrition or doom scrolling on our phone into the early hours of the morning. I mean, we can come up with probably lots of examples that there will be sort of like a intellectual, logical, like understanding that this probably isn't serving me in my or aligned with what's important to me. But we still do it anyways. And I do think, I do have like my background in university was actually neuroscience. And what I love about
Mhm.
the yamas and niyamas is there's an intersect too with some um, kind of like just core neurobiology, like Ahimsa also
Mm.
really intersects with fear. And that I think, like, when we look at these kind of ancient philosophies or philosophies that have been with us for a very long time, there was like a knowing of that there is this like real like we can feel fear, and that can drive like a lot of our behavior, especially when we're kind of not aware and present with ourselves. And so Ahimsa really recognizes that it kind of allows us to understand that, with there are ways that our brain and yoga, another yoga philosophy is sort of, there's something called samskaras, like these kind of like impressions or stories that we can tell ourselves that like create suffering for us.
Mhm.
And really, um this really like activates our limbic system, like our the center of our brain that's very primitive. It's very difficult at discerning between what is like a real life threat and something that's not. And so yoga philosophy, samskaras is this idea, that we can have these impressions that allow for more suffering, um,
Yeah.
And ahimsa is capturing that also, because it's capturing this essence, like it's not just the way we are towards each other, it's the way that we think. So ahimsa is a lot of that, like what story are you telling yourself right now, what belief do you have right now,
Mm,
that is actually causing harm, and actually not allowing you to engage. And when, before we started this, I said to you,
mm,
like all tools can have two sides of a coin. Like
mm.
when you say like nutrition can be used as a tool, but with different mindsets,
Yeah.
it can be harmful or nourishing and helpful. And so really getting to that core belief of what you are doing and why, is really important. So Ahimsa asks you to do two things. It's like recognizing this, um, we all know that like physical violence, of course, but it is
Mm,
actually more of this like, what's interesting in both the work you and I do, it's this the violence we can hold within our core beliefs,
mhm.
the way that we are judging maybe other people or a situation, judging ourselves, and then the actions that flow on from that, that perpetuate and reinforce that belief,
Yeah.
right? And the
Yeah.
control piece that you talked about is that control gives us an illusion that makes us feel kind of like falsely safe within these beliefs. So when I'm feeling in control, I suddenly like maybe only temporarily kind of like abate that fear. Um, and that's a slippery slope. Like control, we work with zone of control in my work a lot, but
Mm,
it has to be coupled with this. Like when you are, I'm in control when I'm doom scrolling my phone at night as well. And it's kind of alleviating, it's like, giving me some comfort in a way. But when we ask ourselves to have ahimsa, it's first like we have to have the willingness to kind of sit and have observation on what's going on, and then also this understanding that our beliefs, we may have a lens on something that isn't serving us, or isn't. Does that make sense?
yeah, I'm like snapping my fingers, when you talked about the intention behind everything, because like I love what you said about uh tools, right? Tools like, and I heard this really brilliant analogy given by someone that when you have a tool, let's say it's a knife, right? It's like you can pick it up by the handle or you can pick it up by the blade. And I think like something like nutrition is very prone to be used like you can pick it up by the blade because because I went through a phase of my life where I was just a complete nutrition fanatic. Like I just thought that if you ate a grain, you're gonna die sooner, and I mean, I don't know, maybe that's true, but like but like now I feel like it's so much deeper than that. Like there are all these nutritional philosophies out there.
Mm.
And isn't it funny how they all kind of contradict each other,
Yeah.
right? So like people are trying to find like the one right diet, but it's like I don't think you can like what do you call it? I don't think you can export that to someone else to find out for you. Like you really have to dig in yourself with your own body, with your own responses, with your own kind of inner guiding compass of what might be right for you. Because, for example, the raw food diets, right? Like they talk about how food in their rawest forms are the best for you because all of the enzymes are intact, blah, 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 blah. So if you
Mm.
cook it, it's going to, degrade the nutrition and your body just, and our ancestors only ate things raw. So you should eat things raw. But then, I come from a Chinese medicine background. My dad is a doctor of Chinese medicine, and I grew up in China, so that's very much my upbringing, right? And it's like you only have warm things, girl. Like everything needs to be cooked warm because that's how your body receives the best. Anything that's cold is going to shock your stomach, right? And you're going to dampen your digestive fire, all of that stuff. So nutrition approaches tend to negate each other, right? And then some people will be like, well, you can just eat meat and that'll be totally good. And then other people are like, no, you just eat vegetables. So I think someone wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma, right? Because we just don't really know what to eat. And
Yeah.
but I think what you said, which kind of underlines all of that, is no matter what nutritional philosophy vibes with you, it's how you're doing it. It's like, are you picking it up by the hilt or are you picking it up by the blade? Because because when you're so fearful, like what happened to me was I really dove into that paleo philosophy, and it's like reading these books about our ancestry, yada yada, and it's like that all makes sense. When I read it, it made sense in my brain. It's like, yeah, we're not supposed to eat grains or dairy. Like this, they're not good for you. We can't digest them. And it actually made me really fearful because like anytime I came near them, instead of being like before, as a kid, grew up in China, we ate noodles, we ate rice, I mean, Chinese people eat rice. Rice is a grain. That's not ancestrally, if you adopt the paleo perspective, that's a no-no, right? And it's like, and yet entire generations, my entire family lineage grew up eating rice, porridge, all these things. So it's like, yeah, it just really depends on how you approach it, doesn't it? It's like if you're going to be so fearful about something, then maybe it's better to drop that knowledge, because like from my work, well, what I know is that you are the most powerful digestive enzyme. Like you could eat something that's quote unquote, hard to digest, but if you're like with a group of friends that you're really comfortable with, you're feeling really safe, you feel the sense of relaxation and groundedness, you really feel alive, you're going to digest anything. Like it's not a problem. So I really love what you said about the fact that ahimsa actually underlies that entire kind of way of thinking. It's like, how are you going to do this? Like you could know about nutrition and that could help, or you could know about it and then be like orthorexic, right? Which is when you just are so
Yeah.
obsessed about clean eating that you actually end up causing a lot of stress in your body.
Yeah, I love that, Lulu. I that resonates a lot, and I've been reflecting on yeah, orthorexia a lot, and particularly within this well-being industry. I read an article, when are we healthy enough? And even the pursuit of health, um, you're right, can if it comes from a place of fear, or like you talked about self-worth in the earlier stage of this conversation, it can cause harm. And we see research on this, people that are wearing and devices that track sleep. We're seeing kind of induced states of insomnia from over obsession. Now, does that happen to all people? No, it doesn't. But does it happen to some? Yes, it does. And so, why are we seeing like that disparity? I think, when you were talking about, you know, when you're talking about this, it made me think like what kind of allows us to practice ahimsa. You alluded to it when you were talking about how when you were looking into paleo and you thought some of it resonated with you, and then you kind of explored more. And what was like standing out for me is like curiosity is a really powerful antidote to this. With ahimsa, two things, practicing compassion and self-compassion, which can be broken down into like individual practices, and curiosity, and mindfulness are all really powerful ways to kind of let yourself like marinate in the space of ahimsa. The more curious you are about what, how do I respond to this? How does this allow me to feel expansive or not expansive, curious about other people's perspectives. It's a really powerful way to practice ahimsa, in my opinion, is curiosity. When you come with an open, curious mind, um, you're not in fear because you're moving towards something, and there's a softness there. And then when you practice compassion around that, like, that increases that space as well. And you talked about nutrition. Like the first thing I say to a lot of clients I work with is that I don't advocate for any diet. Like we're here to figure out, what allows you to feel most nourished, and that's going to be like, part of that is like what your preferences are. Like, do you enjoy what you're doing? Like, is there joy there? Like that in itself is multidimensional. Um,
Yeah.
Not just like what nutrients do you need for your brain to work. It's like
Yeah.
what allows you to engage with life in a way that's meaningful to you. That also is relevant. And you're right, when we are hyper controlling things, that is spoon feeding fear, because it means that the opposite to that must not be good for us. And that is already that's the opposite of ahimsa.
Yeah.
Really now you're right and something else is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about like working with clients and how they and if they enjoy things or not, right? And it made me think of like I guess two things. Like the one thing is trust and the other one is safety. Because I feel like curiosity is only available if we're actually feeling safe,
Yes,
right?
true. Yeah.
Because when you think about like, our primal wiring is that if we see a rustling in the bushes, right, we're going to get out of there. We're not going to think, oh, I wonder what it is, because
Yeah.
our survival mechanism is that strong, like we're going to err on the side of caution. So
Yeah.
that's the safety piece. And then so safety maybe is like a precursor. You need that before you can even be curious. And
100%.
then, yeah, and then the other thing is like joy. And that's also something that you can only explore if you actually feel safe.
Yes, it is true. Yeah, it is true.
Yeah.
This is, and that's such a good point, and you're absolutely right. And I absolutely see this clinically. Um,
Mm,
that, and it goes back to my point about the willingness to hold discomfort.
yeah.
That in itself is helping your nervous system feel safe.
Yeah.
And when I teach this to clients, there's lots of practices you can do. Again, it requires some mindfulness. It first like requires the ability to kind of notice and name what's happening in your body, what's happening with your thoughts, and um, that already engages a different part of our brain, which already kind of down regulates that kind of fight or flight.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
it also just frees up a lot of resource. Like constantly being in a state of fear is very energetically expensive.
Yeah.
It is biologically, our body is biologically doing what it's wired to do. So nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
Um, if the body thinks that there is something there that is a danger, its only job is to keep you alive, and it doesn't really care whether or not you're happy or not.
Yeah.
It's and so, and the resource we use for that is incredibly expensive. It's just energetically draining.
Yeah.
So you're totally right. Feeling safe is a huge requirement. And feeling safe doesn't necessarily that mean that you feel good. And I think that's important to say. Like I have this practice I share with clients all the time, and it's called
Mm,
holding the cactus. I say, if you were to hold a cactus right now,
mm,
how would you hold it so that it's not dangerous? And they'll kind of play with their hands, and they'll sort of eventually like they'll do this, and they'll be able to describe like really softly, really gently. And then this becomes a metaphor for any discomfort. It's like the cactus is still prickly. It's still a prickly cactus, but you
yeah.
don't need to make it more dangerous than it is. And by softening around the experience, allowing yourself to kind of sit there and be gentle with it without manipulating it, like you said, like pushing it away, trying to control it. It loses that power. It doesn't escalate, and that already signals to the nervous system that you're safe. Like this isn't a pleasant experience, but it's not a dangerous experience. And that allows you then to have more resource to be a bit more curious, to kind of, how do I want to respond to this? So you're totally right. Safety is massive, but safety sometimes gets misinterpreted as like comfortable. And it's not always comfortable to be safe as a practice.
Thank you so much for that. And I just love that metaphor you gave, of like holding a cactus. I would like to steal that, please. Like that's just amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yes, you most definitely can, and I've borrowed it as well. It's actually from act therapy, but it's
Mm,
a really powerful metaphor. So we most definitely share it, and
wow.
it it is it's really, I think it is really massive, and it goes back to when you were talking about the choices we make.
Mm,
Um, Most of the time, and you talk about this a lot in your work, like no behavior is wrong, all behavior has a function. And
mhm,
usually it is trying to move you away from something that you don't want to feel, and
mhm,
away, and that is potentially dangerous. So
mhm.
essentially, your body, your behavior is doing everything it can with the intention of keeping you alive.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
broken. It's
Mhm.
and the only way, and then to appreciate that and say, wow, thank you, body. Like you,
Yeah.
like if there was a lion outside, you would, you know, do great things for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as humans, we have these other parts of our brain that kind of
Mm.
this wisdom part of our brain that can
Mm.
kind of step away from that, and say, hang on, like all discomfort isn't danger. So
Yeah.
how can I navigate that space a little bit more gracefully? And it's gonna happen every time. Like as a human, like we cannot avoid discomfort in our life.
Mm.
It is something
That's
that
a quote, what you just said. All discomfort is not danger. That is like a quotable, like I think it's amazing what you said. And like just tying up this conversation, I think you actually mentioned it was actually in another point you already mentioned about non-escalation and just being able to sit with the discomfort. And it's funny how our conversation kind of got to that point because that really is the key. Like if you want to know how, that's how, isn't
yeah,
it? Like to be able to have safety means you're going to be able and willing to be with discomfort without trying to push it away, because that's where kind of our coping mechanisms kick in. It's because something's uncomfortable and we kick in to like push it away or to run away from it or to fight it, or all of those nervous system responses that can happen, the fawning as well, or being or frozen, right, or just not processing it and just or collapsing, all of these things that can happen. And it's like, well, if you want to know how to kind of overcome that, grow the capacity to be with discomfort, to hold that cactus, as gently as possible, without trying to toss it away quickly like a hot potato, or I don't know, somehow try and destroy it or something, right? Because that's another thing we might do. We might try and like manipulate our circumstances so that we don't have to ever look at it, right? Like that's another very valid coping strategy, right? To just manipulate your circumstances. And in fact, dieting kind of falls into that, right? Because if you think, well, my body as it is right now is not enough, but if I
yes,
can manipulate and change its shape, then I'll be safe. So you're manipulating your circumstance in a way, right? Because your body hasn't changed. You've shrunk it temporarily, but it's going to bounce back if you haven't really changed and if you don't really feel safe. So I just love how it all like kind of comes back to this non-violence principle, and non-violence, like you said, doesn't just mean like a passive, oh, I give up, just I'm not going to do anything then and just lay here, which isn't a bad idea, I guess. But but like I think I love what you said about how it's not necessarily comfortable. It's not just gonna like be, it doesn't come without effort. And one of the things that I really talk about too is that as you truly heal your relationship with yourself and with food, you do have to devote to a new way of being. And that's not just a placid I give up. It's a very much a daily devotion. Like when I find myself feeling, oh no, have I gained weight? I notice it and then I'd be like, okay, what's going on with me? Like, what am I really fearing? Because manipulating my body is not going to make this fear go away. So I just love how it all kind of comes back to this central place of being able to hold discomfort. you know?
yes, it's and this gentleness, like we
Mm.
self-compassion, and we can chat in the future about how this then beautifully weaves in, and is it both weaves in and is nurtured by the other yamas and niyamas, which is
Mm.
why it's such a beautiful quote that's been around for so long, when you then look at, even like another yama is like, but just for example, a parigraha, this kind of like non-possessiveness and this, again,
Mm.
willingness um to not overly grip on expectations and outcomes, into the like in the practice of staying in like the process. And so that's again why I love it as a philosophy,
Mm.
because each one can be broken down. You can talk at lengths about the kind of like philosophical conceptual like understanding, but each one also offers like really practical like tools and practices that you can actually do on a daily basis. And like you just said, like a lot of ahimsa is like catching the thought, like noticing it,
Yeah.
and like noticing and go and saying, whoa, like I am feeling like unsafe, or there is like there's something is triggering that fear center in my brain. I'm noticing I'm having thoughts about my body and needing to like control that, what's going on. And then again, like even just noticing and naming in neuroscience is enough to like
Mm.
take the charge out of your limbic system, is enough to
Mm.
like at least like the observation of the fear of the thought
Mhm.
already uncoupling you from the experience in a way that takes charge out, and you get this little fraction of space to become
Mhm.
like, a bit more curious. And you'll have to do it over and over and over again. And part of compassion, one of the 6 components of self-compassion, is
Mm.
shared humanity, is recognizing that this is a biological nuance we have. It is going to happen multiple times.
Yeah.
Um, and just having that kind of like, oh, there's that thought that comes up, this kind of appreciation and gentleness around this is also really important. Not like, oh, I'm a failure. I can't believe I'm having these thoughts again. This is like, as you said, it's a devotion. You have to return to it over and over and over again. And that is the practice.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. You're so right. And when you mentioned about that, just I didn't know that about neuroscience, how that's actually a thing, that if you even just catch something, that in itself removes the charge. So isn't it funny how like, in the end, like we seem to have this like East and Western divide, but like ultimately it's like I think we're all just trying to reach for that same thing, right? And maybe one type of language helps you absorb better, while another helps someone else absorb better. But we're all really just trying to get to that. We're all just human, like I was talking with my husband about this. It's like, I've been trying to like get rid of some wounds for a long time, right? Like one of the central ones is like, well, I don't feel good enough. And it's like, hang on a minute. I'm not the only one who feels this. Like everyone feels this. So is it really a problem to get rid of? Or is it just something we have to accept about our humanity and then just move forward regardless? Like just a total reframe, right? It's like instead of seeing all of these things as like problems, it's like, hang on, but if you have this thought and she has that thought and my mother has that thought and like, the entire community feels like this sometimes. It's like, is that really a problem then? Maybe that's just our humanity, and our job is not to get rid of these thoughts, right? Like, like, because it would be actually violent, right, to try and get rid of something by force. But
Yes.
with this principle of ahimsa, and it's like maybe we're just human and we all have these thoughts, but doesn't mean we have to, live them out, but just
Yes.
accept them and move forward regardless.
Yes, and that's another. Oh my gosh, we could talk for hours. I mean, we have another talk because I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of human flourishing. So I've been I really like I think you're onto something when you say maybe there's something else there. I think you're right, and I think I think we have to. The shared humanity is really important, and in yoga philosophy, like there is a lot of discussion around paradox. You and I've talked about paradox a lot. Acceptance is like you only when you accept will you grow. This is like in a lot of Eastern philosophy and Buddhism and in yoga philosophy. So and both things are, I think that we have a propensity to flourish. I think that that's like also like a biological hardwiring in us, like this kind of like incessant kind of drive to kind of move in a forward direction. And yet we still also have to accept the way things are in order for us to flourish. So it's a whole other topic that I'd love to talk with you about, and there's some really interesting literature on it. And I think but what you really made the point on, and this also aligns with acceptance commitment therapy, so this is now getting into like psychology, but
Mhm.
your thoughts do not need to drive behavior. And a lot of times we can kind of like stew in our minds, and like I need to change this thought, I need to change this belief. And
Yeah.
I do think being curious about your core beliefs and really kind of like looking at them in day-to-day life, there are also practices where you can have the awareness, but they don't have to permeate into the actions. In act therapy, we have something called the choice point. It's like when you have these kind of like prickly, we'll call them cactus thoughts because we use that metaphor. It's like
Mhm.
you can be hooked by them and it can move you kind of away from your values, away from what's important. Or you can have them, you can hold the cactus and you can unhook from them. And you can see them, you can accept that they've come into your mind, but they don't have to hijack and permeate every aspect. And that's a really important thing, for me especially. Like, I can live way too much in my mind, and
We all
sometimes
can.
and sometimes just, again, holding the cactus, being gentle, and then, like, with that new resource you've freed up and that
Mm.
space you've created, you have this opportunity to decide, like, what do I want to take action with right now, and like, what is important to me in this moment. And
Mm.
that's going to cultivate congruence. And
Yeah.
that actually leads into the second yama, which is satya, like truth, right? It's like,
Mm. Mhm.
so it's so important what you just said, like, action can be a really powerful tool. And it can help us take the power out of some of these core limiting beliefs, because
Mm.
action becomes proof over time.
Mhm. Mhm. I know
Yeah.
it's kind of like bringing along your fears with you instead of letting them stop you, because it feels like sometimes fear becomes this block, right? And you try and like dismantle this block, but it's like maybe it's just never going to go away. So why do I just bring it with me? Just
Totally. I
yeah,
love that. I said, like, put it in the back seat, buckle it up, but you're driving the car, and go
yeah,
where,
yeah.
it's courage. I think Brene Brown says, is like, courage is fear walking. You're just like taking it with you. That's beautiful. Well, we should wrap it up.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Mel. And yeah, just in the interest of time, I'll just we won't get you to wrap up with what you offer and stuff. I'll just put it
Oh,
into the
no.
caption under it. But yeah, Mel, you are just amazing, and any conversation with you just inevitably always leads to this kind of distillation alchemy of like truth. you know, yeah,
Always
deep truth that we can all relate to and with. So thank you so much, Mel.
so welcome, lovely.
Yay.